A couple of days ago, Elizabeth Warren sends out staff from her campaign to plant a story in Politico accusing Bernie Sanders of sending his supporters, his volunteers, out to, quote, trash Elizabeth Warren. That story was bullshit. Anybody who doesn't already hate Bernie Sanders knew that story was bullshit from the jump. But Elizabeth Warren and her campaign deliberately put that story out there to capitalize on two things. She wanted to play off and reinforce the narrative that a lot of these centrist Democrats and the mainstream media and really basically Hillary Clinton supporters, this grouchy, crotchety old man who's so divisive, and all he's doing is trying to fracture and break apart the Democratic Party. But it appeared that she also wanted to give herself some cover for what she had planned for the very next day, which was another planted bullshit story, but this time in CNN, and it was based off of, as I'm sure you guys know, so I'm not going to go into all of this, based off a conversation they had back in 2018. She accused Bernie Sanders of saying that a woman can't be president. At face value, makes absolutely no sense. Bernie Sanders, the most progressive senator in the country. He has always been on the forefront of civil rights, women's rights, LGBT rights. I mean, the man went and campaigned for Hillary Clinton city to city, state to state, doing dozens of events trying to get her elected because he thought a woman could be president. He thought a woman could win the election. He wouldn't be doing that for no reason. It's not like Bernie Sanders was bored, so he just hopped on a bunch of planes and buses to do campaign events for Hillary Clinton, even though he thought she was going to lose. No, he thought she was going to win. More than that, Bernie Sanders in 2015 begged Elizabeth Warren herself to run because he didn't want to run in 2015. And he thought she could win, just like many other people, and he thought that she would actually represent the progressive left wing of the Democratic Party. None of that matters. Elizabeth Warren still comes out and with this bullshit, hacky, disgusting smear job on Bernie Sanders. And to make matters worse, she goes out on the debate stage last night and doubles down and triples down on this bullshit, which should make it crystal clear to everyone, anybody who had any doubts that Elizabeth Warren, there is no miscommunication here. Elizabeth Warren doesn't have some rogue campaign staffers trying to smear Bernie Sanders behind her back. No. She's all in on this. So to anybody who is still holding out hope that Elizabeth Warren is some kind of ally to the progressive movement, this should make it crystal clear to you that she isn't. She has firmly planted her flag on the side of the establishment, and all the progressive noises that she was making with her mouth were bullshit, like people like myself have been trying to say for over a year now. She is willing to just outright lie and smear the current leader of the progressive, populist, leftist, anti-corruption movement in the country right now. She's going to go and smear him, do character assassination. And her hope, her end goal here was to damage Bernie Sanders' reputation and in effect damage the movement that he has built for definitely over the last 4 years, but you can say for his entire career that he's built for the last 40 years that have culminated to this point where we're at right now. So again, if you're on the fence and you're undecided about where Elizabeth Warren actually lies in this civil war for control of the Democratic Party, this has to be the last straw. And it really gets under my skin that there's still people out there who pretend like the phrase Elizabeth Warren is a progressive is just a non-falsifiable claim. Despite everything we know about Elizabeth Warren, her character flaws, and her policy record and policy positions, they act like because she's decent on Wall Street regulation and she doesn't want, she founded the CFPB, that those are just progressive bona fides for life. Nobody can ever question your progressive status, no matter how much you fuck over the progressive movement, no matter how many times you're caught missing in action or just on the wrong side of important issues. At every turn, at every critical moment, to the progressive movement, Elizabeth Warren is reliably on the wrong side. 2016, Bernie Sanders runs an unprecedented grassroots anti-corruption populist social democratic campaign for the Democratic primary in 2016. Comes within an inch of winning the thing, even though the entire Democratic Party, the DNC, the Clinton campaign, even the Obama White House, and the mainstream media were all colluding to rig it in favor of Hillary Clinton. While that was happening, Elizabeth Warren decided to sit out until it was safe to endorse Hillary Clinton with what she assumed would be minimal blowback from the left. That's where she was when Bernie Sanders was leading a grassroots movement, going toe-to-toe against the entire political establishment. That's where Elizabeth Warren was on that fight. How do you call her progressive? How do you call her progressive when during the entire Standing Rock debacle for months and months and months, Elizabeth Warren ain't have a goddamn word to say? Mind you, she was out there calling herself a Native American for decades, and at the time we were seeing some of the most egregious abuses of Native indigenous people that I've seen in my entire life. You had Energy Transfer Partner illegally building the Dakota Access Pipeline through what is supposed to be federally protected Standing Rock Sioux Tribe territory with impunity. And they have the local and state police basically working as their private security, but they also have a private security firm who's working hand in hand with the police departments, brutalizing peaceful civil protesters who had legitimate concerns about, one, the violation of Native American sovereignty, and also they had concerns about the environmental impact of this dangerous pipeline that they were building that would have cut right through the drinking water to over 2 million people. There were so many different issues that are important to the progressive movement that were happening right there at Standing Rock, and Elizabeth Warren didn't have a goddamn word to say about it. Climate change. I mean, they were building this giant pipeline to dig more oil up out of the ground and contribute even more to the climate crisis that we're in right now. Elizabeth Warren, now she's this new environmentalist. Where was your concern? Where was your activism when people were trying to prevent this pipeline from being built? And also, now let's talk about her failure on all these progressive policy priorities. She does not support Medicare for all, lied her ass off for a year, pretending like she does support Medicare for all, talking out of both sides of her mouth, and then she puts out a plan that's a public option, and we're all supposed to just overlook that and still call her progressive because, hey, it's Elizabeth Warren being Elizabeth Warren. No. There are about 40 million people in this country who have absolutely no health insurance. The amount of people who have health insurance but can't afford to pay for the necessary healthcare that they need is also around another 40 million people. The amount of people that die every year because they can't afford basic healthcare in this country is 40,000 people. This is a crisis. This is a crisis born about by greed and corruption that does not need to happen. Because in every other modern country, everybody is covered under this government single-payer healthcare plan. The amount of people who die every year because they can't afford basic healthcare is 0. But here, it's 40,000. So progressives, that is a red line for us, and we're not moving, we're not budging, we're not backing down on this. That is a fundamental part of the progressive movement. And Elizabeth Warren is aligned with the establishment trying to defend the status quo and defend this disgusting, corrupt, for-profit private health insurance system that we have, rather than going to Medicare for all, which would cost less, cover everybody, and radically improve our healthcare crisis in the United States. Elizabeth Warren doesn't agree with us on that. Getting money out of politics, Elizabeth Warren is not aligned with progressives on that. She is on the side of the establishment and the corporate Democrats and this whole I'm against unilateral disarmament argument. Elizabeth Warren regardless of what she says half the time on the campaign trail, she does not believe in running a grassroots, uncorrupted campaign completely funded by individual small donors. She doesn't believe in it. That's why she's taking $10 million. $10 million in her primary that she's running right now has come from big money donors, millionaires and billionaires and corporations, which is why she said she'll take all the money, big money, millionaire money, billionaire money, corporate money, super PAC money, dark money, all of it, quote, all of it, if she was in the general election. So you're going to tell me that same person, day one, is going to come in and bust up the establishment as soon as she gets into the White House and really go to town and drain the swamp, as Trump would put it, and take on the corruption in Washington, D.C.? Fuck no. She got there by the corruption. So the same problem we have with every other corporate Democrat, every other establishment politician who says they want to fight corruption, but they still take the money, you're not going to actually fight corruption because it's benefiting you. That's Elizabeth Warren. Again, on a critical issue, on a non-debatable issue for the left and progressives, Elizabeth Warren is just firmly on the wrong side. My God, her foreign policy. I mean, we can go back to, and I did a whole 30-minute video about the time that she spent as a Republican, I'm assuming, supporting all of their disastrous neocon adventurism around the world, imperialist, regime change, foreign policy. She was supporting all of it. She has, again, I haven't heard her say anything about the Vietnam War. I haven't heard her criticize the war, say it was a bad war, say it was a mistake, and say we committed unspeakable war crimes, and the reason why we were there at all, and as long as we were there, was at the behest of the military-industrial complex. Haven't heard her say it yet. Haven't heard her criticize Ronald Reagan and his overthrowing Latin American countries like Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras, or how he did the same shit in countries in Africa. I haven't heard her criticize a word about it, even though she voted for him twice. But I mean, let's talk about her current foreign policy. Votes to increase the absurd, outlandish, criminal Pentagon budget reliably. Even for Donald Trump, she voted to give him an increase. Voted to give Donald Trump more money for endless war than he even asked for. I mean, I was one of the only people to cover her answers that she provided to the Council on Foreign Relations when they sent candidates a bunch of questions about different areas of foreign policy. Almost every one of them, she was dead wrong and completely in line with the security apparatus and the Pentagon and the State Department and the CIA talking points on all these different issues. Whether it was Iran, she was out there fear-mongering about Iran and the possibility of them getting a nuclear weapon, and we have to deter Iranian aggression in the region. Saudi Arabia, she was talking about, she literally said, we need to work with Saudi Arabia to fight against terrorism in the region. Knowing God, I mean, I don't know if she knows this, but everybody who's paying attention knows goddamn well that the U.S. and Saudi Arabia are more responsible for the terrorists and jihadists like ISIS and Al-Qaeda running amok in the Middle East than anyone else. We supply them weapons. We supply them funding. Saudi Arabia is on a record. Elizabeth Warren, Hillary Clinton, in her own emails when she was Secretary of State, said to someone, yes, we know that Saudi Arabia is directly funding ISIS. We know that they're building Wahhabist Salafist mosques around the world, these fundamentalist mosques, to radicalize Muslims around the world so that they join jihadist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So for Elizabeth Warren, I don't know what none of that is factors into her analysis of our relationship with Saudi Arabia, because the generals in the mainstream media and the national security apparatus tell Elizabeth Warren that we need Saudi Arabia. They're our closest ally in this war on terror, even though between the two of us, we basically are funding and arming this entire war on terror. So she would continue our disgusting relationship with Saudi Arabia. And mind you, this is while they're committing a genocide in Yemen, the worst humanitarian crisis on the planet, and Elizabeth Warren's still talking about we need to maintain our partnership with them and continue to provide them weapons and military equipment and coordinate military operations with them. Again, while they're committing a genocide. So she's just on Venezuela. She's aligned with the Trump administration with this silly ass coup that they try to stage with Juan Guaido. She was backing it the entire time, talking about Maduro's a bad guy, he needs to get out, he rigged the election, all that stuff. Bolivia, wrong side of that too. So you go down the fucking list on foreign policy. I can't think of a place where she's right. I haven't even gone down the whole list of grievances I have with Elizabeth Warren, but I still feel like I made my point. I don't know how anybody can call Elizabeth Warren a progressive. The only thing that anybody has, the only shred of evidence that anybody has that Elizabeth Warren is a progressive is that she fought for Wall Street regulation after the crash in 2008, and she fought for the CFPB, and she even fought the Barack Obama and his corporate Democrats to get it passed. That is the only thing that anybody can give Elizabeth Warren that is considered progressive. And I always gave Elizabeth Warren credit for her work post the crash of 2008 because the response from the politicians in Washington, D.C., it was just insanity. It was, let's bail out the banks, let's give them trillions of dollars, and everybody that they fucked over with all their scams and their fraud and stealing money from customers, everybody who got fucked over by the banks can kick rocks, and we'll just write the banks a blank check. We won't prosecute any of them, and then we'll just, keep it pushing. Act like nothing happened. That was a response from everybody in Washington, D.C., and it was fucking bonkers. So for Elizabeth Warren to come in and say, well, hold up, that's a little bit crazy. Let's at least try to do some regulation so that they don't keep doing the same shit and stealing people's money, crashing the economy, getting a blank check, and then walking away scot-free. Let's at least put a little bit of regulation on it. That is the most common sense fucking thing anybody can think of. If you picked a person off the fucking street after the 2008 crash, they would all say, we need to regulate the fucking banks because this is insanity. So, I always gave Elizabeth Warren credit for that, but I think people are putting way, way, way too much stock into her advocating for the most common sense reforms after the biggest crash since the Great Depression. It wasn't really like she stuck her neck out on that. That is the point I'm trying to make. So if anybody is clinging to that at this late date in 2020 and still trying to say Elizabeth Warren is a progressive because she's decent on Wall Street regulation, what the fuck are you talking about? You have blinders on. It's like saying Elizabeth Warren is a progressive is a non-falsifiable claim. I can give you this whole list of Elizabeth Warren's sins and how she's fucked over the progressive movement, the leftist movement, the social democratic movement in this country at every turn. And still, somehow, people will try to tell me Elizabeth Warren's a progressive because of CFPB. Like, again, it's a non-falsifiable claim. If I tell you Elizabeth Warren is aligned with neocons on foreign policy, if I tell you Elizabeth Warren is aligned with the establishment in defending the status quo of our disgusting private health insurance system that has created this healthcare crisis in the country, somebody's still going to say she's a progressive. If I say Elizabeth Warren is going to maintain the status quo of corruption in Washington, D.C., and she's not going to push for a constitutional amendment to get money out of politics, and she's not going to push for publicly financed election, if I tell you that, somebody's still going to respond to me and tell me Elizabeth Warren's still a progressive because of CFPB. If I tell you Elizabeth Warren left Bernie high and dry in 2016 in the fight of his life, trying to bring about social democratic reforms to this disgusting, corrupt political system that we have right now, somebody's still going to turn around and give me an excuse about, oh man, she was trying to decide, and then the whole year went by, a year and a half went by, and before she got the chance to endorse Bernie Sanders, it was all over and she had to endorse Hillary Clinton anyway. Somebody's still going to come out and say that. And even now, I hope this is it. I hope this is the straw that breaks the camel's back for anybody who was holding out hope for Elizabeth Warren, because now she's just outright lying and smearing Bernie Sanders, trying to do character assassination, willing to burn down the whole movement if it serves her politically. That's who Elizabeth Warren is. She's not a fucking progressive. And I need everyone who calls themselves a leftist or progressive in independent media to get that through their heads and stop pushing this bullshit.